Today we're going to do 3.3. It's mean standard deviation of group data. So everything in here is going to involve with group data, and you're going to have categories and different things like that. So to basically find the mean and standard deviation, you're going to have to make a frequency table. Now we did this with the histogram section of chapter 2. You're going to have the different high and low categories, and what we're going to do with those, we are going to use the midpoint. We're going to call that x. We have to calculate the midpoint, and that's going to be our x value. And then we're going to count the number of entries, which is just your frequency. Okay, and we know what frequencies are. And we're going to add the number of entries to find n, and then we'll see how this all works in the next example. If you look on your pink sheet, your formula sheet, on the very, very bottom, the last two formulas in chapter 3 are involved with this section. So you see this formula to calculate the mean. The sum of your x value, which is your midpoint, times the frequencies, which is the number the number of data points in each class, if you want to think about it that way. All right. The standard deviation for frequency distribution is here. This is the quote-unquote complicated one. Here is the computational one that we are going to use to calculate standard deviation. And this is on the very, very bottom. You see both of these on the bottom. You might want to circle the one that I did. That's the computation one that we're going to use. So here's a concrete example just to see what group data is all about. So to be considered group data, you're going to have classes or ages or categories, if you want to think about it that way. So in this example, it's ages. We have a group from 30 to 34 years old, 35 to 39, 40 to 44, and so on. Okay, that causes us to have that category type thing, which is why it's group data. Now, what are the x values? Okay, the x values are specifically the midpoint. So if you add up 30 plus 34, you get what? 64. Divide that by 2. There's your 32. You can do that for all of them. This becomes the x value. All right. Now, what is the f? F is the frequency. So in this particular problem, there are 4 people within that age group, 5 people within that age group, 2 and 9. Now, what do we need to calculate the mean? We have to add up the x times the f, because we need to know how many frequencies are in each category. That makes a huge difference. So we multiply them together, and this is what we need. So we're going to, at the top of your mean formula is these categories, all 4 of them multiplied together, the x times the f. So 4 times 32 is 128, and so on down the line. And you will end up seeing that the 820 is all the categories multiplied together. The midpoint times its frequency summed up is 820. And then you divide it by your number of data points. Now, the number of data points within this problem is the frequency. So you have to add up all the frequencies. Okay, this is essentially your n in every other problem we've done. It's the sum of all the frequencies. So then our mean in this problem is 820 divided by 20, and that gives us 41. So the mean in this particular problem is 41. To find the standard deviation, now no different than we did in the very first section of this, or actually second section, excuse me, is to find the mean, subtract every x value by that mean. So notice how the x minus the mean 1 is 32 minus our mean, which we already know is 41. We already know the sum is 20 as well. But you're going to subtract it by the mean in every single one. And then you got to square every single one so they're all positive, or else you're going to have a weird score really close to 0. And then you multiply it by all your frequencies. So x minus mean squared times the frequency. So this 81 times 4. This 16 times 5. 1 times 2. And 36 times 9. And that will add up to get you the sum of that. So what's going to end up happening is that becomes the top part of your thing. So this was the 730 we had on the previous page. I know that the number is 20, subtract it, so we're just dumping it into, now this is the complicated formula. Okay, so how often are you going to have to do this particular formula? Rare, because it's not that easy. Now, there were only 5 categories. It's relatively straightforward. We can do that, but it's not always going to be that simple. So what I want to show you right now is the computational formula. So if you look at the computational formula, we basically need 3 pieces of information. We need to find sum of x squared times the frequency. And then we need to find the sum of x times the frequency and square it, and we need to know what n is. Okay? So how can you do this? A couple different ways. You need to know the sum of xf. Well, you just take your midpoint times your formula, or times your frequency, and then you add them all up. Okay? And in this particular problem, we already found that it was 820. You're going to get that pretty easily. The other part that we need to find is the sum of x squared times f. So we actually have to square x. So like 32, we've got to square it and then multiply by 4 to get this number, and you're going to have to do that a lot. Now once again, this gets pretty tedious, and to add this all up, it does take a little bit. I want you to use the calculator. That's the point of this. So here's what I want you to do. If you grab your calculator, I want you to put these x values in L1. Okay? These frequencies in L2. And what I'm going to try to do is take the calculator up here, and I believe if I go to Stat, you go to Edit, I've already done this. In L1, if you can see this, I don't know how clear it's going to be, but I have 4 numbers in L1, 4 numbers in L2. My x's or midpoints in L1, my frequencies in L2. And then to calculate this, you need to go to Stat. You need to go over to calculate the first variable statistics like I showed you in the previous sections. Except this time we need to put in L1 and L2. So I'm going to insert L1, comma, L2. And if you push enter, notice the 820 is the sum of x right below the mean of 41. Sum of x is 820. Sum of x squared is 34,350. That's the information that's pivotal for you because those are the two numbers. Now I know the frequency is not showing there, but this is the number that you need. So if we go back to our slide, we needed, notice the 820 showed up as your sum of x, and then this 34,350 was the sum of x squared when you do the first variable statistics. So this is pretty nice to have that showing up. Now, what's nice about that, you don't have to go through all the nit and grit of finding those two numbers. Use the calculator to do it. You're still going to have to set up your formula for me so you know what the computational formula is used for. Okay? So the 34,350 minus sum of xf, which is just sum of x, or the 820. And then you need to square that and divide that by n. And n in this problem is the number of frequencies, which is 20. Then you have to divide all of this by 19. And if you do the math with this, there's your answer. But we're going to end up having 34,350 minus, if you do the 820 squared divided by 20, you get 33,620 over 19, which if you subtract that, here's where it becomes the square root of 730 over 19. And if you take the square root of that fraction, you get approximately 600 or 6.2. If you go back to your calculator, notice the S of x, your standard deviation of x, is 6.198, which rounds to 6.2. So that's the showing you how to use the computational formulas. Yes, your calculator can show it, but I'm still going to want to see you set up that formula in due time. So that's it for that section. Here are the 4 problems that we will attack in class tomorrow. I hope you all have a wonderful day.